Everybody get a seat, please.
Oh my God. Oh, okay. Oh, he's right in New Britain. Yeah, I need to.
Okay, we have a little bit of business to take care of first before we have the entertainment. So if you bear with us, we'll start off with that.
Okay, I'm going to try and keep the business portion of the meeting very, very short. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask you to approve amending the bylaws and the articles of incorporation. The board of directors feels that we'd like to add a few members to help get some of the work done that needs to be done. And so basically, this has to be approved by our annual meeting. So I would ask for a motion to authorize the board of directors to amend the bylaws and articles of incorporation, to increase the number of directors from 9 to 12, increase the quorum for a meeting from 5 to 7, and allow the board to fill vacancies between elections.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, now we have to act on the report of our nominating committee. The nominating committee recommends the election of the following slate of officers and directors: Timer Downs, President; Will Brinton for Vice President; Ed Sabiga for Secretary; me for Treasurer; Ty Carrington, Edie Carrington, Kathy Grabowski, Bob Brinton Sr., and Mary Jane Winnie for Director. And we could have further nominations from the floor if anyone is interested in serving. Are there any nominations? Hearing none, I'll declare nominations closed. A motion is in order to elect a slate of officers and directors recommended by the nominating committee. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That's the brief business portion of the meeting. I will say we now have 2 vacant directors' positions that we'd like to fill. If anyone's interested, please see President Timer Down. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I think we're in for a real treat tonight. I know they put a lot of work into it, but we not only had our historian, but we have the Woodbridge historian here. I'll let Bob Britton give you an introduction. Bob?
Thank you, Timer.
Do I need this? I don't think so. Yes, we'll see. I wanted to thank you all for coming here tonight. Looks like we have about 100 people, which is about what our normal complement is. Tonight's subject has to do with a road, and that, you know, most people probably think, gee, how boring that is. But what it isn't. The Litchfield Turnpike, earlier called Straits Turnpike, has a history that goes back to 1797, over 200 years. If you live on Litchfield Turnpike or the northern part of Amity Road or Whaley Avenue, New Haven, or New Haven Road in Naugatuck and so forth, you live on this road. And if you don't live on this road, every one of you in here is driven on it and probably never really thought about the people that have used the road before you and the things that have happened over that period of time. The way this is going to work is I'm going to introduce our friend Don Menzies here, who's going to do all the work, and then I'll come back on for the easy stuff. Now, I think what we have to do is recognize Mr. Menzies for not only being the president of the Amity-Woodbridge Historical Society, but he's also coming here on his birthday. I'll do anything for an opportunity. Please don't sing. I'll do anything for an opportunity to embarrass Don. A very great friend. You want to try using this, or you want to wait? Yeah. You're on. Can you hear me a little better with this? Is that working a little?
try to hunker in on it a little bit. Kind of a scary fact, but between the two of us, we have lived on the Litchfield Turnpike for 86 years. We realized as we were going through putting this talk together, 86 years on one road. I'm just really pleased to say that only 22 of those are mine.
Don't do the math.
It really was up to us to put this talk together. We realized that there was just no question about that. And there's really no self-aggrandizement in that statement. It's just the truth. Because of our association with the road, because fully a third of the original Turnpike Road runs through our two towns, and coupled with the fact that Thomas Darling Jr., as most of you know, the Woodbridge Historical Society is housed in the Thomas Darling House. His son, Thomas Jr., was clerk of the Litchfield Turnpike Company for almost 20 years. The house stayed in the family until 1973, and they never threw anything away. So consequently, we have hundreds, if not over 1,000 documents relating to the early history of the Straits Turnpike. And so what we needed to do was pour through those and extract important information from you folks tonight. Initially, we decided that we knew we were going to know a little bit about our area, but we wanted to know about the entire length of the road that went from New Haven to Litchfield. So over a year ago, we sent out little flyers to every historical society along the way, from New Haven all the way to Litchfield, with a self-addressed stamped envelope and a little flyer inside that said, yes, we have information, but no, we don't. And I mailed them all out to the right addresses, and we waited and we waited and we waited, and we never heard back from most of the other societies. So we assume that they don't have any real information to help us out. Until one day, we got not just an answer to our request, but we got a packet of information that came to us from Watertown, Connecticut. And actually, it came from the Watertown town historian who is here with us tonight. And I'd like to publicly thank Florence Proud. Is that right, Florence? For all her help in putting together sort of a middle-of-the-road section of the turnpike for us in the town of Watertown, which we knew nothing about. We were able to find places that we never would have found, thanks to Florence, and things on the road that we knew nothing about. So without her help, it really would not have been a complete talk. What we did was we toured the turnpike in several different stages, and on one stage we were coming into Naugatuck, and we discovered that we made a mistake on where the bridge actually went across the Naugatuck River. We got to the Naugatuck Historical Society on the day that they were closed. But there was someone in the office there, and lo and behold, he opened the doors to us, and we found out a lot of information behind closed doors on their day off. I don't know if Ron Gagliardi is here tonight, or anybody from Naugatuck? No? Well, I'd like to thank them too for their help in straightening us out on the route. So anyhow, having said that, we really hope that you enjoy our 36-mile trip to Litchfield. We think we found all the little side roads that most people don't know about anymore, or live on and don't even know it was the turnpike. And we've also found some abandoned sections with those little faint white lines still showing through as the forest encroaches in on either side to let us know where the passing lanes were 50, 75 years ago. So two questions that we have always asked ourselves as we've been preparing for this, even before that people have asked me as president of the society over the years, that I thought I should address right up front tonight. First of all, why do we call it Straits Turnpike? And unfortunately, the answer is we really don't know. We can only surmise. And we just figured maybe because it was such a significant landform, as you'll see in the slideshow, that it was just something that people knew about. And so it was a reference point. People knew that was the turnpike that went through the Straits. Perhaps it was because it was about a halfway point, and instead of calling New Haven or Litchfield, it was in the middle and kind of satisfied everybody. That's the best we could come up with the evidence that we have. And the second question is, when did it become the Litchfield Turnpike as opposed to the Straits Turnpike? And that's a multi-faceted answer. It kind of down here always was. Though you see most of the records, land records and records that we have on display here tonight from the company that refer to it as the Straits Turnpike, also, even very early in time, we noticed some little documents that say Litchfield Turnpike or the Litchfield Road. So what we think is that over time, it gradually changed from one to the other down here. But remember, in Watertown, it is still the Straits Turnpike. There's still a stretch of road that is officially the Straits Turnpike. And of course, in Litchfield, it would never have been called the Litchfield Turnpike. Heck, they knew where they were. It probably was referred to as a New Haven Road, like we do in Bethany and called the Cheshire Road. That's right. Okay, Will, I think we're ready to start this class.
It's on?
Press away.
Yep.
Well,
The,
isn't that good?
the lights are behind you.
Uh-huh. Where I might need help with Will is focus, but that's not correct. These are new glasses and they don't do well with this. Good? Okay. I like this slide because it to me is kind of a Dickinsonian feeling of the excitement and the wonder of travel in the 18th century. Stagecoaches like this certainly did use the road. To me, it gives the feeling of the heyday of the turnpike era. So let's talk a little bit first about this term turnpike. What the heck does it mean? We call it the Litchfield Turnpike, and we do that incorrectly. It is actually, the correct term is turnpike-road, and it was always referred to as the Turnpike Road because it is a road with a turnpike on it. The turnpike was the toll gate, and the term pike is an ancient term that refers to any kind of a pointed object. So it's a requirement today to use something called a pike pole to get into buildings that are burning. It was a pointed pole that blocked your way, and you needed to turn it in order to let you pass. So the technical term is Turnpike Road. We have shortened it to the word turnpike. Turnpike roads then, as distinguished from ordinary roads at the time, were those on which gates barred the progress of the traveler until payment was made for the privilege of using the road. Now, such payment was called toll. And we never did find out the derivation of that word. But the gates were known as toll gates, and the dwelling house of the gatekeeper was known as a toll house. Hence the large plates of cookies in the back of the room here. This is actually a slide of a London gate from about 1819. Our turnpike system in America was pretty much an exact replica of the English system. So a few dates are necessary to give some perspective. Don't worry, there will be no test after the talk. 1346, King Edward III granted the privilege of levying toll on all who passed from St. Giles to Temple Bar in London. Not sure where that was, but it was different than what we're talking about. This was a king's proclamation that gave specific permission for someone to levy a toll for the upkeep and maintenance of a stretch of road. It wasn't until 1663 that the first road was put into care of a turnpike trust or corporation in London. And our system is based on the same rules and regulations. However, it wasn't until 1785 that the first turnpike was established in America, and that was in Virginia. I love this picture. This is one that Florence let us borrow from the Watertown Historical Society, and it is the Straits Turnpike better than 100 years ago. But to me, it actually sort of shows the conditions of roads, gives us an idea of the conditions of roads in America prior to the Revolution. Apparently, the restrictive policies of Great Britain prevented to a large degree any trade between the colonies, or very little, and most of that was coastal. Towns had little money, and they certainly weren't going to spend it on the upkeep and maintenance of roads. So the ancient roadways were in just a deplorable condition. As you would probably assume, many of them started out as pathways of our Native American predecessors that were turned into roads as the colonists moved inland. Transporting freight over most of these roads for any distance was extremely expensive. $3 to haul a cord of wood 20 miles in the 18th century. That was a ton of money. In fact, sometimes it was just plain impossible to do it because of the ruts and the steep hills. So up to the 1790s, most non-coastal communities relied on their own people to provide for their own needs. Trade occurred within towns, but not a lot happened between towns, especially one here. It was a little dark, unfortunately. It's to show you that the Turnpike era, which began in Connecticut around 1795 and was pretty much over by the mid to late 1850s, was a burgeoning business. Between 1795 and 1853, 121 turnpikes sprang up in Connecticut, and that's why this slide is up here to show you. Those are all the turnpikes that came along in that 50, 60-year stretch. In most cases, the turnpike companies would improve existing roads. They were not in the business of building new ones. That would cost too much. The turnpike companies were not required to build bridges or replace them. The towns were responsible for that. It was written into their charters, again, based on the English system. And that did cause a lot of friction between the town and turnpike company over the years. This is a great sign from Middlebury, a major crossroads with the turnpike. It's actually a reproduction of a sign that was made maybe 100 or so years ago. Unfortunately, they got it wrong. The year is incorrect. The turnpike that we're talking about, the old Straits Turnpike, was incorporated in 1797. The privilege of building turnpike roads and collecting toll was granted by the state legislature to individuals who organized into turnpike corporations. The roads and bridges were widened and improved through private capital. They were privately owned roads and were operated for the revenue derived from the collection of toll. These guys were in it for the money. This is a masthead from an early Connecticut journal printed in New Haven in November of 1797. The Straits Turnpike Company was granted its charter in October. And the following month, this newspaper that came out, that's legislative, it's actually calling the first meeting of the directors of the Straits Turnpike Company. And does it say at Aaron Benedict's house in Waterbury? Aaron Benedict was one of the first directors of the company. Waterbury people tried very hard to get the turnpike to go through their town center. Another thing we tend to forget is at that time, Naugatuck was within the boundary lines of Waterbury, having been cut off as a separate town until much later. So it did go through Waterbury, but not through the center. And many potential investors were dissuaded from joining on because at some point, we don't know why, we decided not to put the turnpike through the center of Waterbury. And this kind of shows you the route down here in New Haven. And you can follow that yellow line all the way up through Woodbridge and Bethany, into Naugatuck, into Watertown, or Middlebury, Watertown, Morris, and then up to Litchfield. Most turnpikes were designated to go from a specific point to a specific point. And in most cases, it was from a county courthouse to a county courthouse. That was very much the case in our situation. We could not find a picture of the county courthouse in New Haven. It is that building right there, I believe, because it's connected with the county jail. And that's on Church Street at the end of the green. And this is what is now Court Street. So we knew that the courthouse started there, which means they would have come up Church and gone up Elm Street. Right along through there, the first leg of their journey. And it would end at the county courthouse in Litchfield, which is this rather ecclesiastical looking building on the end here. It would go up South Street, which is just to the left here, and would have ended right, technically right there, the green is over here. This building no longer stands, though there is a courthouse on that site. I believe it's the third or fourth one having been destroyed by fire. Milestones. There aren't many of them left along our route, but they were put up every mile along the way, as was the case in every turnpike in Connecticut. And the word is they arose like mushrooms across the state as the turnpikes flourished. At one point it was estimated there were 600 milestones across the state. About the time of the Civil War, by the 1930s, about half that many. If you would like to see a really good stretch of milestones on a turnpike road, just get on Whitney Avenue in Mount Carmel and go north or south towards Cheshire or back to New Haven. They still have most of theirs. These are in front of the Ilione Clark, to the right of the Ilione Clark Tavern in Woodbridge, just south of the Garland House on Route 69, the house now owned by Richard and Maria King. They're a bit of a puzzle. The one on the left has some Roman numerals, and the one on the right has some Roman numerals. But they don't add up to the total length of the turnpike road. They don't necessarily refer to the mile along the turnpike that the tavern is on. So we have to do some more work in trying to figure out what they mean. The one on the right has an X, what looks like a minus sign, and a V, which would make sense. 10 minus 5 is 5, and this is the 5-mile road, point in the road. Why would they go through that kind of trouble on a milestone to do that? We just don't know the answer, unfortunately. Part of the multitude of documents at the Darling House are dozens of the original stock certificates that the corporation issued to raise capital. They sold stock to raise the funds to put the road into shape. They estimated it would cost $12,000 to fix the road from New Haven to Litchfield, to do that whole job. Can you imagine how much $12,000 would cover to fix the road today? We're talking, what, about 1 or 2 feet? $12,000 to fix the whole road. So they sold 120 shares at $100 a piece. John Darling, Thomas's brother, writes at one point that now the New Haven and Woodbridge people own 42 shares. He was quite proud of that fact, which probably meant they had quite a bit of leverage at the directors' meeting. This is one of Thomas Darling's own shares. Now, I don't know if there's any insider information going on there. As far as we know, the company always paid their dividends, maybe not on time, but I believe they were pretty good about that sort of thing. Stock certificates were issued over the years. We have them in various years. That one, I think, was 1801. We don't have any photographs of the original directors of the Straits Turnpike Company. We do have pictures of some of their houses, though. This, many of you will recognize as the Darling House. It's about 1860, the earliest photograph we have. Again, it's down on Litchfield Turnpike in Woodbridge, for those of you that have come from away. As it looked about the time of the Civil War, it was red. And the turnpike is going just in front of that stone wall. Thomas Darling Jr. again was one of the original founders of the corporation. This is a page from Aaron Benedict's account book of the Litchfield Turnpike, starting right with the date of October 29, 1797. He was an original charter member and director and kept very good track of every penny he spent to make sure he was reimbursed. We have this whole book that lists just everything that he did for years for the turnpike. He was actually named on the charter itself. It reads Aaron Benedict and his associates. So we think he must have been the real mover and shaker behind the whole concept of this turnpike. There was a Mr. Terrell from Waterbury, or again, Naugatuck at the time, who was an original director, but he went off the books really soon after, and we think it was probably because Waterbury Center did not get the turnpike. This beautiful house up in Watertown is owned by one of the very earliest, if not an original director. If he was not an original director, he missed it by a year or so. His name was Younglove Cutler. Fabulous name. I wish I knew what the story of that name was. I don't know if Florence knows who you're coming after. His house here is actually on Route 6, I believe, which is about a stone's throw from the original turnpike, facing a different direction than it used to, but this home is still standing in Watertown. We have much of his correspondence that he emailed to Thomas Darling over the early years. Usually very concerned about how money was being spent. Many of you have probably seen signs through the years, big wooden boards that post the rates of the toll for all to see. So when we got to a turnpike gate, they would know how much they owed. We don't have any of those. There is one for the Derby Turnpike, I believe. I don't know if Orange has that. Does Orange have that?
No, New Haven Colony has it.
New Haven Colony has the original signboard. This is a manuscript version of that, which is on display up front here. Afterwards, you can take a look at it. I love the way they spelled empty. I don't know if anyone's picked that up yet. Yankees used to spell phonetically. Up there it says T-M-T-Y. But it tells you exactly how much it was going to cost you to use that turnpike. Now, there were exemptions for that. For instance, nobody worked on Sundays back then. Some of us remember that today. The turnpike was free on Sundays because people were allowed to travel back and forth to Sunday meeting free of charge. And since no one was allowed to work, they just opened the gates and let people go. Also, if you were going to or returning from a mill for family business, you were not charged a toll. If you were doing your normal farm business, not to exceed a 4-mile limit, you were allowed to pass toll-free. Now, believe you me, those gatekeepers knew everybody in those days, and they didn't let anybody pass what they thought owed even a nickel. But if you were just doing your normal farm business and you lived around the turnpike, you got to pass it nothing. I just love this picture. I can't tell you for sure that it's on the Litchfield Turnpike. It looks like it, but maybe not. But it is a Woodbridge resident. His name is Pearl Sperry, and he looks to me like he's going about his normal farm business. So I'm sure he didn't have to pay the toll. We have an original toll keeper's book. Imagine that. You'll see that there were 4 toll gates all along the Litchfield Straits Turnpike Company. One of them, going from the Haven up, was in Woodbridge down in what we call the flats, right near Bradley Road. The next one was far end of Bethany, right near the Naugatuck line. The next one was up in Naugatuck, across the river, and then there was one in Watertown. I love this picture because it really is a snapshot of the turnpike. It's really towards the end of the life of the turnpike, but it shows what really a nice road it started out as. It's a picture of Westville, and it was painted originally by George Good, no stranger to people in Bethany. It was turned into a lithograph in 1853, so it was still a turnpike at this point. The reason I have it up here is to read something to you, a quote from Timothy Dwight, who was president of Yale College and a prominent author in the New Haven area. He set out on a journey in 1798, and he records in his journal that I set out on a journey to Virginia, I assume that's in Vermont, in company with a young gentleman and rode to Waterbury, the road which passes through the township of Woodbridge and Bethany, and through Salem, which is now Naugatuck, was for the first 17 miles a turnpike road, laid over a rough country with unusual skill and judgment. It is not incommoded by a single disagreeable ascent or descent. Which means that in less than a year, when their corporation, they had the road in pretty good shape. For him to not complain, I have a feeling he would have complained bitterly if the road had been anything less than it was. He also mentions, by the way, in his diary, that the people of Woodbridge and Bethany were industrious, sober, and generally harmonious, peaceful, and orderly. And I think that kind of describes us today. Except maybe the sober part. But in reality, turnpike business was not an easy one. In fact, it was pretty difficult. In spite of all the exemptions for paying toll, for instance, Yankees are Yankees. And if they can get away from paying for something, they'll do it. And one of the ways they did that was by either making or using roads that went around the turnpike gates. You see here the survey of the Straits Turnpike Road and the Shun Pike from fork to fork. We'll see a picture of that next, which is kind of hard to decipher. But Amity Road, Route 63, that goes through Woodbridge and Bethany, was a Shun Pike. It was a road that people would opt to use instead of using a good road and paying the toll. They would use the turnpike for the stretch if they could, then they'd zip across to the Shun Pike, bypass the toll, and then come back onto the road again. Yeah. The directors, here's the picture. I need my little pointer in order to show you. Here is the junction down here, I believe. That's Whaley Avenue, be right here. Amity Road will go up this way, and the Litchfield Turnpike, Straits Turnpike will go up here. About this point was the toll booth. You can see the Shun Pike is below that, so you could zip up there and cut across, or you could actually take the road all the way up just by the gate. We're all the way up to north end of Bethany here. So this was the Shun Pike, which is we now call Amity Road, and this is the turnpike. Right around down here would be where Thomas Garland lived. This was a curve, a very dangerous curve that lasted until the 50s. Is that correct, Doc? Yes. In the 1950s, locally it was called Bethany's Curve. The Bethany town line is, of course, right around there, too. So Shun Pikes took their toll on the investors. Another thing that happened was encroachment of other turnpikes. This happened in a lot of places, but it also happened on our Straits Turnpike. For those of you not from around here, we are down in Westville in New Haven. very near where that picture I just showed you of the man in the ox cart coming into Westville. The road on the left is Fountain Street, which became what was called the Ribbon Falls Turnpike. In 1802, it was chartered, and its terminus was right here. Straits Turnpike goes up through Westville to Woodbridge and Bethany and beyond, and this road was put in to deliver goods to Derby Landing, I believe. It was known as Humphreysville at the time. And it's still Ribbon Road in Woodbridge today. And Fountain Street, which comes right down here. Now, that meant that if you were going to use coming from New Haven, if you wanted to use the Ribbon Turnpike, you would use the Straits Turnpike for your first 2.5 miles. You wouldn't pay a toll for them for that. And with the increase of traffic, it caused them great concern because they had to keep that road up, especially. And they got no money for doing that. So encroachment, shunt pipes, and there were other problems. There were lawsuits galore, actually. In 1809, for instance, there were two. One gentleman sued the company for $20 because he lost his ox. And we don't know exactly what that means, but he won his suit and was paid $20. Another gentleman was paid $60 because he lost his carriage and his conveyance, and all his goods and services off to the side of the road for want of railings. Apparently they didn't have guardrails in those days, or they didn't keep them up. So this man had to, he lost everything and was reimbursed for it. So finally, in the 1820s, the directors petitioned the General Assembly for the following. Because of the shunt pipes and the increased cost of maintaining the New Haven-Westville leg, this has caused a lessening of income. So in 1805, the gates collected $2,509, but in 1819, only $1,963. They request of the General Assembly that the Straits Turnpike Company be released from all responsibility of that section of the road, unless they let them move the turnpike gate down below so they could collect the toll. Well, it took a year, but the legislature finally let them relinquish their rights to that first 2.5 miles of the turnpike, which would have gone again from down here on Court and down Elm Street, Broadway, and out into Westville. So they didn't have to worry about keeping that up anymore. This slide back here, it's dark, but right in this front corner here, there's a bridge. You see that wooden bridge? That's actually in Nautica. But twice in less than 2 years, that bridge washed out. That was the only way across Straits Turnpike in Nautica for a mile or so either way. It was a real main artery. Now again, the town was responsible for fixing the bridge. The Turnpike Company was not, but the town tried to make the Turnpike Company responsible. And it was one of those you do it, no, you do it, no, you do it things. And so traffic was of course cut off, and revenue was cut off. So they lost money in those two bridge deals, even though it ended up that Nautica had to pay for those bridges both times. Just constant aggravation. So the turnpike area in New England again began about 1792. It was pretty much over by the 1850s. Most people think it was the railroads that did them in, but in actuality, most of the turnpike companies have given up the struggle before the railroads really appeared or took hold. It was simply a case of not enough business to make the investment pay anymore. And so in dire straits, in October of 1854, after about 57 years of operation, Mr. Leland W. Cutler of Watertown, and I'm thinking he must have been Young Love's grandson, well, I'm not positive of that. He was the last clerk of the corporation, and he was authorized to relinquish to any town who requested it all right and title to the Turnpike Road. About that time, most of the turnpikes had already gone out. Actually, the last turnpike I understand to collect toll in Connecticut was the Derby Turnpike in 1934, and they collected toll through most of the 19th century. But it was 1854 that our turnpike went out of business and became just a regular town. Each town was responsible for maintaining it. That's the history part. Now I'd like to start the tour we'll zip through the various towns up to Litchfield. Again, we start in New Haven. We have no picture of the county courthouse. This is, I believe, the center church on New Haven Green, kind of across one square from where the turnpike road started. Not too many 18th century houses left in New Haven. This was one on Elm Street. It's now the faculty club of Yale, I believe. There's maybe 3 in a row. Many of the other ones were raised for the modern courthouse and other buildings. But this is one that would have seen turnpike traffic. It certainly was built before the turnpike started. And then we get to the area called Broadway. Even back around 1812, when this map was done, it was called that. Yale's behind us. And we all know these roads as Vicksburg, Goff, and Whaley. It says Litchfield Turnpike Road. And so even in I believe this is 1812, the little map, they're already referring to it as Litchfield Turnpike Road, even though it was technically the Straits Turnpike. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. And here it is today. This is the parking lot in the middle by where the Yale Co-op used to be. This is a one-way road now, but this is the original trail of the Straits Turnpike. The big Christ Church is to our left. This is the rectory of the Christ Church building. There was a church building there that precedes the big stone that we own now. This building, however, was there during the heyday. And until you get to Westville, I don't believe there's another early house along this stretch of Waverly Avenue anymore. And many of them are going rapidly. Again, we get back to this beautiful dirt painting from Westville, just showing what a great order was coming in. This was a major manufacturing area, and received a lot of turnpike usage to West Rock in the background. Very much a snapshot of what the turnpike was like. Today, you can still see vestiges of the old factories, with the West Rock as a backdrop. There's an early map showing just the amount of industry going on around in Westville at the time. And the original turnpike road coming along here, and here goes the Brinton Turnpike up off this way. Whaley Fountain, again, the place where much headache for the Straits Turnpike Company with this Room Falls Turnpike coming in. And then we get to another major interchange, and we're talking about the Turnpike. Well, this is where Amity Road comes in and the Straits Turnpike Road comes in. Again, familiar to most of us, but not many visitors we might have today. There is the old Ponderley area. As you can see in this wonderful photograph, just donated to the Bethany, a copy of it just donated to the Bethany Historical Society. It shows the original Ponderley company, I believe it was Harper Paper Company. They were actually the first company to manufacture colored paper in America, I believe. Again, a perfect snapshot of the turnpike. This is the Straits Turnpike when it was still a turnpike. Like a beautiful West Rock backdrop. Kind of a bit different than this shot, which is the same shot. This works. And we'll just trace the route. I can't see it too well with these glasses in mind, but I think we're going right up through here, the western side of Woodbridge. I'm sorry. That's why we have it. This is where we think the original half gate in Woodbridge stood. This is the intersection of Bradley Road and Litchfield Turnpike going up this way. You can see a little brook here that's been redirected to the West River, which runs right here. We think this was called the Mile Brook, and with a marker for where the toll booth occurred. It might have been a couple hundred yards north of this. And it's located right down here on the old map showing the Turnpike. Just some early homes along the way. This one is gone, unfortunately. It's the home of, it's a Sperry home. I believe Calvin Sperry lived in it. It was a brick structure. It's now in this picture all ivy covered. Many of you may remember this house. It stood into the 70s or 80s. Without this nice little front porch. You can see the outline of the porch on the brick building behind it. And the fellow who was restoring it unfortunately took down all the interior walls, and the brick just couldn't support itself. It fell down. So we lost that. We have this one. This one's near and dear to my heart. This is the house that I live in. And I moved into this house about 10 years ago. It's a picture of it in the 30s, just after it was renovated a little bit. That dorm was there again. Facing the turnpike, you can just see right in front of you now before it was enlarged and made a major fast-moving thoroughfare. You can see how empty the fields are down to the river here now. It's all grown with trees. This house was built finished in 1795 by Thomas Clinton, who was intimately associated with the turnpike. We know that he was a cooper, barrel maker, and he no doubt utilized the turnpike to ship his barrels north and south, I'm sure. And he built this house 2 years before it incorporated, so he was sitting at the right place at the right time. He was a friend of the Darlings. He helped actually maintain the turnpike. This is the way the house looks today. You probably recognize it more from speeding by our house about 50 miles an hour. This was a Sunday morning when there was nobody out, so I was standing in the road and get a picture of the house. This indenture, actually, is a contract agreement between Thomas Clinton and the Straits Turnpike Company. He was responsible for maintaining the road between milepost 4 and milepost 5. One of the documents that Mr. Darling kept and was hidden away in his life until the Historical Society took over in the 1970s and found literally dozens of these documents, contracts between different people who lived on the turnpike and were paid to maintain their stretch of road. And of course, their pay would have come out of the toll that was collected. Nice picture of what is called locally as Happy Valley. It's the Straits Turnpike Road, Route 69, Litchfield Turnpike, running up. The Darling House barn is right here, so it's just north of the bar house. It was painted in the 30s by Helen Woodbridge. And actually, moving back a step, I guess it's slightly out of place. This is the Eleones Park Tavern. The original park probably predates the Revolutionary War, and this addition was added around 1810, we think, and sometime around then, the Leone Park went into the tavern business and made quite a good living on the people going up and down. Here's his milestone again. Can't tell, I believe that's the one that says X minus B. We have no idea at this point what that means. We know that, as far as we can tell, the stones have always been in the tavern. They weren't moved there as a decoration. They need something. It's just part of the puzzle we haven't solved yet. Just up from the Clark Tavern is this wonderful old stone arch. You wouldn't even notice it as you zip across the little tiny bridge just south of the Darling House. But it's still there. A very, very early bridge across the turnpike, probably installed sometime during the heyday. Probably not an original bridge, but a very, very early one. Not too many of those left. We get to the Darling House, familiar to most of you. Again, built in 1772 by Thomas Sr. His son lived there, who was part of the Turnpike Company, original director. His son lived there, and his family lived there until 1973 when we took over. Now, this is a great early map of the Darling House right here, and it mentions the Straits Turnpike Road. This goes to about 1800. We know there was a mill, a cider mill on the Darling property, and it's in the field just north of the house. We also know that back here, this little thing right here, was a house owned by the Sperry family that predated the Darling House. Here's the Darling House as you look around the turn of the century. See, we always had trouble with rugged roads. One of the horse barns that are associated with the Darling House now, we have this in here to show this contraption is not in its original location. It was up the street at Shepherd's Farm, but it is one of the original, it's in a watering trough, but it doesn't go back to the earliest bridge of the Turnpike Company, probably late 19th century. There are several of these up and down the road along the course of the way it looks good. Great picture showing the Turnpike as a dirt road still. But after the time that the water company came and flooded this whole area, the reservoir, for some reason they drained it. So you can see the original route of the West River with some of the old stone walls that are still underwater today. The Shepherd's Farm over here, the old North School that was torn down turn of the century or a little before. Edwin Judge's house that was long gone, and his mill site that was back here. Some other houses that had just been gone pretty much from anybody's memory today. The turnpike goes up the hill from there. Just talking with someone tonight who was under the impression that the turnpike originally was probably even farther away from Shepherd's house than it is now. I'm probably standing right at the edge of it to take this picture. Originally, actually, you can see this little trail right along here was the western edge of the turnpike. It actually came very close to the Shepherd's house, and they had the watering trough right about there, a little farther up. Originally, Mr. Shepherd, I guess that would have been F.T. Sr., was paid a couple bucks a year to keep that trough full of water for horses coming up and down the turnpike. At the base of Carrington Hill, right about where the treatment plant is now on Route 69, Woodbridge, was a milestone. And it was there until, again, the turn of the century, and it disappeared. Nobody knows exactly where it went. And it says, let's say, 6.5 miles from here. So that place is about 1.5 miles north of Clark's Cabin. Great old photograph of kids playing on the turnpike. It wasn't always just a ruddy, mucky mess. But sometimes it was. This is still in Woodbridge, but we are going up the hill now, Carrington Hill, almost to the Bethany line. Bob could probably speak better on this picture than I could. There are people in here that we know. Well, we know who owned the car. Was that a Whitlock car? There are Whitlocks here that know people in that picture, I'm sure. That car, I understand, was mired in muck on numerous occasions. And I think this is where I turn it over, isn't it? To Bob Brinton, who will take it to the rest of the way on up to Litchfield.
Thank you very much, Don. I want you to recognize the fact that much of what you've heard from Don tonight is derived from primary source materials. He didn't read that in the book. These all came from original letters, ledgers, and other documents. So what we've done, or what he has done, is really to bring out material that much of it was not known before, or at least it wasn't readily available. And yes, we are entering Bethany. You probably can't see much on this. This is the earliest map that's available for Bethany. It's 1852, and it shows the turnpike starting down here, and it wiggles its way up. It's unlike most of the roads in Bethany. Most of the roads in Bethany are pretty straight. If you want to look, again, this is maybe hard to follow, but most of these roads are pretty straight. But the Litchfield Turnpike goes diagonal. The Litchfield Turnpike had a destination. It had a goal. Litchfield. I had to throw this in here. The Whitlocks that have joined us tonight donated some of the materials that we've used. This was their house that Fisher moved in 1917, something like that. That's one reason I showed it. The other reason I showed it is, I'm showing it is, this is where our home is located today, and if Don can show his property, I can show mine. Yeah, of course it's on the Litchfield Turnpike. There's a very good reason. Right across from that is the Sperry Cemetery. I'm only showing this because it's one of the few cemeteries that we ran across on the turnpikes, going from New Haven, the center of New Haven, to the center of Litchfield, which is where we're headed for right now. But first, you'll remember that Don mentioned there are some parts of the turnpike that are no longer used at all. And this is, again, right near the town line. Here's an example of a section of the road that is no longer used. You can see how the trees are growing in. This was the area that was straightened in the late 50s to eliminate Dead Man's Curve. We heard about that a moment ago. Just an early house, early Sperry house. Throw this in here just because it's a nice early shot, and it shows what the turnpike probably looked like a little over 100 years ago. If you look out here, that's it. There's some leaves on it, and when that photograph was taken, no automobile had probably ever gone by there. But even though there was no car, people were certainly proud of their farm equipment. I always like this one. This was, again, a house on the Litchfield Turnpike, in this case right across from Bethway Road. And across from that house, diagonally, was the Wheelman's Rest. Was that there when the turnpike was going? No. Why do I put it here? Well, I like the photograph, but it also shows a different mode of transportation. The Downs house, again, here's a good example of a different mode of transportation. In this case, your sleigh in the wintertime. This early house, this is an earlier house. This was probably built later. Probably was just about new when this photograph was taken. And subsequently, the old house was demolished. We're not going to look at every old house along the turnpike, so if you live here in an old house and you don't see your house, don't feel bad. We just picked some particular locations. I kind of like the old Methodist church that stood on the west side of the turnpike, somewhat north of Hatfield Hill Road. This was torn down in the mid-50s, just 55 or something like that. Almost across from that church was a blacksmith shop. I can't swear that the blacksmith shop that's shown here is the one that stood across from the church. However, the Litchfield Turnpike was the commercial center of the town in the 19th century, and there were numerous blacksmith shops along the Litchfield Turnpike, in Woodbridge and at least 3 in Bethany. This particular one is interesting because this is one that says Bethany, 1859. This is a sketch by George Dury that he used later in one of his paintings. But while he was in Bethany, he sketched this particular blacksmith shop. It's the only rendering we have of any blacksmith shop in town. We think that this is the house that went with it. There were several families that owned this house over the years, and it stood almost across from the Methodist cemetery, which was the location of the Methodist church, which you saw a short time ago. This house was purchased by the water company and torn down sometime probably around 1910. It's another beautiful house. It's not the same house. Another house that stood on the east side of Litchfield Turnpike that would have seen turnpike traffic, as Don had mentioned earlier. Just absolutely beautiful with Lake Bethany in the background. Excellent views because there were not many trees in those days. Mostly agricultural fields. Again, this is a house that was demolished at probably again around 1910 when the water company took over. This was occupied at one time by a cellar. Two things here. We're going from south to north, obviously, and we've gotten up to the intersection of Hoadley Road and Litchfield Turnpike. And this was the location of the famous buttonball tree that stood there since the 18th century. It certainly was there at the time of the turnpike, way before the turnpike was incorporated. And it was a local landmark. And this was always called, this intersection, that's how we rode there, this intersection was always called Buttonball Corner. Unfortunately, the tree here, as it appeared in the probably 1930s, is sort of superannuated and is suffering from a thinning hairline or something like that, probably due to a storm. Whether this is a damage due to the Hurricane 38 or not, I don't know, but the picture was taken sometime in the late 1930s. Well, I looked at this. The other thing that I noticed was the road guardrails. And it occurs to me that when I was a kid, they were all painted white. State used to come along and paint them white to make them more visible. And it's been a long time since I've seen white guardrails. This particular house, this is an earlier photograph. This house is just south of Davidson's Corner. There haven't been any Davidsons in the town of Bethany for well over half a century. Yet you'll notice that any atlas or map that you look at, including those found on the internet, still tell you that the intersection of Carrington Road and Litchfield Turnpike is Davidson's Corner. And I kind of like that. This house is now kind of a yellow or gold or mustard color. But at the early part of the century, this was known as the only red house between New Haven and Watertown. And it stayed a red house for a long, long time. I just thought I'd give you this. Obviously, this wasn't taken by an 18th century airplane, but this is a photograph from the 1930s. So to orient yourself, this is the Hatfield Hill Road Dam, Lake Bethany, which I probably told you before, looks like a dinosaur footprint. The Litchfield Turnpike goes up here. When the state came along in the 1930s and created Route 69, it utilized the southern part of the Litchfield Turnpike for Route 69, and then used the northern part of Litchfield Turnpike in Bethany for Route 63, which has resulted in people being confused for many, many years about the intersection of Litchfield Turnpike and Amity Road, on the Carrington Road. This is Carrington Road, which continues this way, and Litchfield Turnpike is working its way up to the intersection. Familiar site. This is the barn at the Horpin property, which was originally the Tyler Davidson farm. And that's the house. And Litchfield Turnpike went beyond there, as it still does. Wow. No, that isn't Bethany, but I had to throw it in because that's supposed to remind me to tell you about the fact, two facts. Number one, Tyler Davidson, who was a great chronicler, he wrote about things as they happened, and he left a very important journal. And in the journal, he kept track of things and changes as he saw them. And for April 23rd, 1907, he notes that he regrets the passing of the last stagecoach between New Haven and Watertown. April 23rd, 1907. So if anybody asks you, now you know. That was the last horse-drawn stagecoach. In addition to the turnpike creating lots of traffic and business. It also required services, the same as a highway does today. You have gas stations. We've already mentioned that there were several blacksmith shops on the Litchfield Turnpike in Bethany. In addition, there were a couple of taverns. And one was just north, this isn't it. It burned many years ago, but the Smith Tavern was just north of Davidson's Corner on the Litchfield Turnpike, or some people call it the old Litchfield Turnpike. I'm trying to stand that out. This is the former Winter House on Litchfield Turnpike on the left, on the west side of the road, just north of Munson Road. And that's an earlier picture. And what's interesting about this is, number one, tradition says that this was a good place to get fresh horses. It was more like a garage, but at one time it was a stable. And if you look at the other side of the building, which you can't do today, you'll see that there are little windows there to provide light for the horses. And here's our second watering trough. It's located just north of that house, and where the stables on the other side of the road. And these are probably were put in here sometime in the late 19th century. They look to me like they're used steam boilers. They're very heavy iron sheet iron, and they're held together with huge rivets. And evidently they're strong enough that they've been able to survive a century filled with water, and which often froze, without really evidently resulting in any damage to them. That's rather remarkable. The town of Bethany paid to maintain this up until 1923. Okay, moving along, I only threw this in here because this is George Lay. Any old timers who remember George Lay? He was a local character. We are going to be having an upcoming talk that may interest some of you on scandals, legends, and characters of Bethany. And that's probably going to fill the room up. If anybody has any they want to share with me that we can add to our collection, I'd be certainly glad to hear them. And, and embellish them. Intersection with Amity Road. Well, for people that haven't been in Bethany too long, this is Amity Road going north. This is Litchfield Turnpike. Crossing over, going toward Route 42. See the sign at 42. Up until the early 1970s, this was the end of Amity Road. This was the end of the shunt line. And Litchfield Turnpike continued. Again, to eliminate some nasty corners, like the ones in Woodbridge that Don showed you, this area was straightened. We're looking down the old turnpike here. This is the former Tuttle House. This was removed sometime in the late 50s, I guess, early 60s. The great shot of the old car. But this is that intersection. Originally, this was a judge house. And we go from there down the hill past the Hotel Pond, which today is silted in, although I recently read about someone that drowned there in the early part of the century. I think you'd have a hard time drowning there today. This is the Perkins Tavern, and this was a very reputable tavern. I say that for good reason, to contrast it with the next tavern that we're going to see. This tavern was here in the 18th century, and it burned in 1903. But this would have been a place where you could have stopped for refreshment of various sorts, liquid refreshments, food, drink, place to stay, put up your horse. You'll remember that Don mentioned the Clark Tavern in Woodbridge, and tradition has it that that was used mostly by drovers, people who were coming from the hinterland, up country, driving their cattle to market in New Haven. Because New Haven was an important port. And the Litchfield Turnpike, after all, was designed to connect the hinterland with the coast. The Valentine beer sign, we know this is over 100 years old. Great photo. We have quite a few photos of this tavern, Perkins Tavern. This is a good tavern. This is the other tavern. And this was not here at the time of the Turnpike, but I'm showing this to just to let you know that this will be included also in our talk on scandals and legends, characters. And this is called the Litchfield Grill. The Litchfield Turnpike goes through here. This was not built until, it was built around 1910, and I'm told by someone here who had visited this establishment that it burned down in 1939. This was, Perkins Tavern was famous, whereas the Bethany Hotel or Litchfield Grill was notorious. More about that another evening. This is the home of Archibald Perkins, interesting character of Bethany, or interesting individual character. But he was a toll keeper, and we're down to the point that we're near the location of Bethany's toll gate. If you remember, Don showed you the entire turnpike, the turnpike and the Shunpike from this 1817 map. Then he showed you the southern part in Woodbridge. And this is the northern part. There's the Shunpike, the Litchfield Turnpike is wiggling up here. Here's the toll gate. Now, you see this little part here? Well, that curve evidently bothered the State Department of Transportation a great deal. And so in the late 50s, early 60s, they straightened it out. They just connected the dots there. And this is now Grant Road. That little horseshoe is now Grant Road. The gate school, because it was near the toll gate. This is the third school, I think, in that location. We have a toll gate road now, a very small subdivision, but with a name that commemorates the location of the early toll gate. And we're looking north on what's now Amity Road, but we know it's really Litchfield Turnpike. Toward this gap, you see the mountain coming down, mountains coming down, that's the Straits. That was the way they got through the mountain. If you didn't go through the mountain that way, you'd have to go west through the valley, or you'd have to go east through the Norfolk Valley, or you'd have to go east through the by way of Cheshire, where Route 10 is. But this is the middle one. This is the Straits one. This is the Straits Turnpike. In addition to hotels or taverns and blacksmith shops, we had mills. This happens to be the Perkins Mill, which, although this building is a later date,
Turn it off.
we had mills in Bethany, and they occurred near the turnpike, but they really were located near Watertown mostly. But it was certainly convenient if you had a mill like this one, like this woolen mill, Twitchell's mill here on at the corner of Edwards Road and Litchfield Turnpike, now Amity Road. Very convenient. You've got the water here, run your mill, and right here, this is the railing on the bridge, so you wouldn't fall off. This is Litchfield Turnpike out here. That one railing was so you wouldn't fall off into the turnpike. Priors. Deacon Campus is a nice picture, probably in the 50s. I just love the kids climbing over it. But Beacon Cap is that glacial erratic that sits on the top of the Beacon Mountain, which kind of overlooks the straits. And Beacon Cap is up there somewhere. And again, you can see how there's a very narrow gap, just wide enough for a road and a river, Beacon Hill Road. And we're entering Naugatuck, so I can make up anything I want now, and nobody's going to know better. We're moving along a little faster because I don't know anything else. And we went into the Straitsville section of Naugatuck. It was like a little village. Originally, much of this area was part of Bethany, later broke away. This is the Collins Tavern, which was built in 1811. And remember, we've seen some taverns along the way. This was a beautiful one that unfortunately was demolished. I think it was in the 1970s, somewhere in the mid-1970s. Just an absolutely beautiful building. We think designed by David Hoadley. But again, this was originally part of Bethany. If you look at Alice Bunton's book on Bethany's old houses and community buildings, you'll see that she includes this because she considers it a Bethany building because it was part of Bethany. And that's where the tavern was now. So a quarter of a century later, it's just crushed. Imagine we're going to see a Krispy Kreme donut shop or something here. Thank you, whatever you do. Quick look at Naugatuck. I mean, most of us gone through Naugatuck. Don and I made 2 trips through here. The first time we missed the original location of the turnpike. We weren't quite sure. I mean, we knew that we had to come up this way, but where do you cross the river? Well, in his photographs, we can tell that you crossed here. The first time, we thought it was the main bridge down here. The first bridge that you come to cross from Frankie's Al's Hot Dogs. Al's Hot Dogs. I'll give you credit for that. But we found out later it was really the Maple Street Bridge here that carried the turnpike across the river and then north. In this area, this is the Whittemore Mansion. You'll see in a moment, much later building, but a landmark. And the Beecher Tavern, correct me if I'm wrong, but go later, was located here. Is that right? And the toll gate was right near this intersection. We're not quite sure where. But that's the wooden bridge. You saw a little different photograph of it when Don was talking about the bridge troubles. And just to give you an idea, what they've done is they've got sort of a solid board fence there so the horses wouldn't look down at the water and be upset. A little later, they probably would have been upset by the quality of the water. But this time, I think it was probably just the possibility of falling that could be a problem. If you know where Maple Street is, or the Maple Street crosses the river on what is now the Whittemore Bridge, which interestingly enough pretty much survived the 55 flood intact, although it was overtopped by quite a bit of water. This particular building, called the Naugatuck Hotel, stood on the corner. If you were traveling north, taking the left across that Whittemore Bridge, this was located to your right, exactly under where Route 8 is now. And I just think I'd like to have that building. Don took this photograph, and that tavern, the Naugatuck Hotel, stood right here, right underneath where the bridge was. This is Whittemore Bridge, the site of that earlier wooden bridge. And Don went over and found, am I right in there somewhere? He found a plaque, which probably is hard to read, but it tells that the bridge was dedicated to John Howard Whittemore. Whittemore's were industrialists in Naugatuck and also philanthropists. The Bethany Whittemore connection was Harris Whittemore owned the airport. He was instrumental in setting up the airport in Bethany in 1923 and owned much of that part of the town surrounding the airport up until the 1960s. Incidentally, this is the railing by the bridge. That's the new railing that was replaced after the flood. The original railing was gone in 1955. And that's the high water mark, right there. High water mark of the flood of 1955. So if you were standing on the bridge, which it wouldn't be, it certainly would be well over your head. I'm just really amazed by how the Naugatuck River has come back. I can remember it many, many years ago, and it's hard to believe that you have a picture like this from the middle of the Naugatuck River. Beg pardon? I still didn't hear it.
Naugatuck Garden Club does it.
Did they? Yes. Just I don't know. Thank you, Naugatuck Garden Club. This is a picture of the Beecher Tavern. Remember I showed you on the map? And Beecher Tavern is here. We're looking across the river. And this little white building there is the toll house. We don't have many photographs of toll houses. So we're very fortunate to have been able to locate this photograph in a history of Naugatuck. This is the Whittemore mansion, which would have been just beyond the toll house. This is all you're going to see of Waterbury. Remember that Don said that for some reason the turnpike never went through the town of Waterbury. Well, not exactly. He's nearly right. This is the Waterbury town line here, and this is the turnpike. Really not enough to talk about, so I won't. Middlebury is our next town, and it's kind of interesting. Those trite things. Middlebury, land of contrasts. We're going to be taking a look at the turnpike wiggling its way through the eastern part. Route 63 as you enter Middlebury. One of the few places where we found the route sign clearly marked. Pretty rural looking here, but before long we get into parts of Middlebury, which ironically they've retained the historic name of the area while totally obliterating its original appearance. Don couldn't resist this. Moving quickly to Watertown, we had to show you this. We have a lot of good memories about our trip in Watertown, and this is the oldest house in Watertown, according to the town historian. Right? See? You say right in, right? I'm not sure exactly where this is. This is an intersection of Watertown with the Litchfield Turnpike. It must be fairly early. I always look at the tracks. Are there car tracks there? Are there truck tracks? Are there buggy tracks? These are pretty skinny. There's no motor vehicle to spin on that. I kind of like this one. We had several photographs of this that were furnished to us. And this is the Bishop Tavern. And it was moved from the turnpike in about 1860. Originally it stood in the center of pretty much in the center of the town where the Watertown Library is. But it was moved. The interesting thing is, it's still a tavern, but its appearance is somewhat altered. It's the same building. You notice the gambrel line, one of the dormers is surviving. Should we go back in time for a moment? H.G. Wells couldn't have done better than that. Personally, I don't think it's a big improvement. But it's interesting that it still has the beer signs, so it's still a town. This is a milestone in Watertown, known locally as the Franklin marker, whatever. We found very, very few markers. We found one other stone we think might be a milestone, but like this one, it has no inscription, and it's really just, the only reason we know this is because of local information. Scobell Tavern. Again, showing you how important the turnpike was to commerce, why you needed so many taverns. If you were a drover going from Litchfield to New Haven, 36 miles, if you're taking cattle or something like that, I think your average is about 2 miles an hour. It's a long trip, even with a horse. Even with a horse and wagon, or even with a stagecoach. It's not something you necessarily do in one day. Okay, here's the part I think we like the best. I mean, outside of Bethany and Woodbridge. But Lawrence gave us a little hand-drawn map that showed us the original location of the Litchfield Turnpike, which diverges considerably from the current Route 63 in Watertown. And we turn off onto Litchfield Road, I believe, and we get into some absolutely beautiful country. We just like this particular apple tree. I had to physically restrain Don from appropriating some of the fruit of this tree. I was sort of like a reverse serpent. Nice farm barns, well-kept fields. It's interesting because we felt this is really probably more what the Litchfield Turnpike looked like back in the early 19th century during its heyday. Amazing, isn't it? We tarried here for a while. We have a lot of photographs of this location. I love the elm tree, classic vase-shaped elm tree. We stopped here and we looked at the cattle out in the field. I guess the cattle were out on this side. They were out here. And after we had been there a short time, they came to investigate us and see what we were all about. And we stopped and took a look to see what the bridge was all about. And it's another kind of early bridge. This is the bridge inspector. It has concrete here that looks like it was added later, but most of this is all stone. And that's the other end of it. You can see the stone. Very bucolic. Yeah. They couldn't figure us out. You know, they've been looking at that bridge for years. They didn't find it that interesting. I can't tell you much about this, except that from what we can figure out, this is pretty close to the location of the Watertown toll gate. I may be wrong.
Yes, you're right.
Wow. Music to my ears. Well, once we figured, well, you gave us such an excellent map. Into Morris. Morris has got some different amenities. Certainly the White Flower Farm is very attractive, more kind of rural. It does have mansions too, though. And we looked at this and compared it with the cow scene, and we saw it was so dramatic we had to throw it in there. Enough said? Interesting that they still have a livery stable. kind of harkens back to the past. Certainly livery stables would be something that you'd find in some of the towns along the way, cities anyway. Litchfield, scenic road. Anybody that's been to Litchfield knows you don't need a sign to tell you. But we're getting close to the end of our journey, so there's hope. The Tappan Reed Law School, along the way, we could have given you 100 photographs of old houses in Litchfield, and we chose not to. But that's the schoolhouse in Tappan Reed residence. We stopped at the Historical Society in Litchfield when we were up there, and they were pretty helpful. We were looking for some sort of early map. Well, this was on the floor. This is a mosaic. So we took a few photographs. It showed what Litchfield Village looked like in 1820. I mean, you remember that we started off with those, the Doolittle map in New Haven showing the green, and the courthouse. Yeah, it's supposed to be like that. It's not upside down. Trust me. This is, it's called Town Hill Street, but they call it South Street now, I believe. And the original meeting house, the original Congregational Church was right in the middle of that huge, wide area that encompasses the green day. This particular area there shows you a tavern, and we're going to show you a photograph of that tavern in a minute. And this is the original courthouse, the terminus of the turnpike. And remember you saw a photograph of that earlier. And here's a little bit more. This is where you'd be coming into the town from the south. Turn left. At this time, it was called the Mansion House Inn. That's a huge hotel for the 19th century. And down here is the courthouse. And remember Don showed you that earlier. And over here, this area is the green. That's the center of Litchfield. It's kind of what it looks like today. The Mansion House Inn is long gone. The original courthouse is gone, but its successor, maybe the fourth one, I think one of the courthouses burned, and they built another one, and it burned within a year. Or it may have burned before they finished. It was an interesting story. But at any rate, the courthouse is still there. Still in the same location. It's the building that you see here. And the jail, because the courthouse is out of jail. And this brings us to near the end. This is the sign at Davidson's Corner. Somebody made a handmade sign, probably because the one side of the Litchfield Turnpike sign where it joins with Carrington Road at Davidson's Corner is misspelled. I don't know if anybody else noticed that. Litchfield. It's close. To kind of finish up, here's a section of the road that's been eliminated. It's been left for nature to take over. You can see nature taking it over. White lines are still there, although they probably were painted well over a quarter of a century ago. And I have to leave you with something that, again, this was our really favorite place in Watertown. And that's it. What we're going to do now is take a brief intermission, and if you can refrain from the food for a moment, we have a 6-minute presentation that Steve Cooper, who's standing there at the ready, is going to give to you on the subsequent to 9/11. It's called Ground Zero. He had the opportunity to actually go down into the Ground Zero excavation, and they allowed him to photograph. Very moving tribute. why don't you just kind of stand up and stretch for a few minutes?
You gotta get an interview up early tomorrow morning, or what's Mom's got? 7:30 there.
We're gonna call your house the red house now?
Well, you know, I'm the guy who changed it, and he bought it.
That was on the SUV.
He still did his Davidson.
And she's in kindergarten. Yes.
He changed it to the gold.
Dead roll.
Yeah, it was a white red.
So she likes the train?
Oh, yeah, you see how happy she is. She was having a blast.
You changed it.
That's my handsome
You know that.
Yeah, somebody would say, oh, I know that a train.
So you took the two kids.
Well, no, that was the same train ride on that night we did it. I mean, no, that was Saturday. And this was
Very sharp.
yeah, the different train.
No, just when you're working.
Litchfield Turnpike
But you can see she's got that impish look in her face.
We gotta say hi to Lisa.
Absolutely.
But you'll take that hour. Right out of the middle of the weekend. That's why I said right before the party was all the stuff.
Yeah, she's failing. And about twice a week, my brother calls and says, he has the she's going about the week. Then she comes right back. No, it has nothing to do with emotion.
No, for you.
Oh, me, you know, it's an emotional roller coaster for him, not me. He lives right there. He sees her almost every day. And it's not an emotional roller coaster in that he would be devastated if Mom went. She's approaching 90, and she's been ill, and she, you know, you don't live forever and all that. Between me and Lynn, it's like you can hate when you're gonna go. It's like she's being inconvenienced. Which is sad, but we didn't
To look at.
I know my brother and his wife. Like, how much longer is she gonna hang on type of attitude? She's my mom. Well, he's kind of very passive.
Come on, 6 minutes to get to eat.
It bothered me. I don't know about anybody else out there. That's a heck of a way to end an evening. Why don't we bring Chris Sullivan up here? Is she here in here? There she is. Chris has got a few words for us.
Hi. Obviously, I'm in Cub Scout regalia tonight, and the reason that I'm here, this past summer, Rick Shepard passed away, and Rick lived down in Woodbridge. But his two boys, Eric and Ben, come up and participate in our Cub Scout pack here in Bethany. Their cousins, Corey and Ryan and Devin, are all part of our Cub Scout pack. And what we're doing as a Cub Scout pack is we're having a fundraiser ziti dinner for them on Saturday night, November 2nd. And the proceeds from that dinner will go to the trust fund that's been established for Eric and Ben. And so we're here asking that if you'd like to come to dinner that night, it's a regular Bethany community dinner. We'd love to have you come. The tickets are $7 for adults and $4 for children. It's ziti, meatballs, salad, and bread, dessert and beverages. There'll be a teacup raffle as well. And we'd love to see you come. And we'll be selling tickets out in the hallways, so you can either see myself or Al Manelli, who's down there in the back, either one of us, and your support would be welcome. If you can't come and you'd like to make a small donation, that would be appreciated too. Thank you.
Now we're going to top Chris with her dinner. On November 1st, the Historical Society is having one of our chicken dinners over at Veterans Memorial Park. And we have tickets for that. And if you care to go, I recommend you get the tickets because we've sold out our last 3 dinners. So it's a good time. It's a good time to sit down and talk with friends and hope you win a raffle or whatever. But we always have a good time there. And let's see, what else we got? Time to memberships. We always like to hear from people that want to become a member for the next year. So that's due in January, and you can do it tonight, right after. Time for cookies, cakes, and all the goodies, coffee. Thank you very much for coming.
Are you told how to cookies?
I think it was Toll House cookies here.
I'm having a